That's what I'm talking about, son. Get you some of that daggone pie.
Woo-hoo! Looky there. There's your bug-eyed big one right there.
Getting started. We're getting started.
Here's what I'm talking about. Gosh dang gorilla.
Let's go, baby. Straight meat. God, look at that biggin.
All right, welcome in, everybody. This is Big Ed, and I'm the host of the BAM Pod. And tonight we've got a really good show. It's going to be fun. We've got Zack Thompson and we've got Nick Cloutier on here, and they are going to be talking about wintertime largemouth fishing. We're going to try to break down some of the ways they're going to be preparing. These guys are both top anglers out here on the West Coast, and we're going to be discussing some of the ways that they get prepared for the upcoming Apex Tour, which is out here on the West Coast. Zack, Nick, welcome in, guys. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to come in here and talk with us.
Happy to be here, Nick.
Say one of you got to talk. Two people
Glad
that just
to be here.
Yeah. So, this year's actually going to be a lot different than last. Obviously, we're going to have more water. It seems like we're going to have, out here in the West Coast, around the country, it seems like everybody's, in that mode. And this is definitely, I think, everywhere we're in winter. I've been watching the ice fishing up in Wisconsin, on the East Coast and all that. And, one of the things I really think people, stop doing this time of year is fishing for, the largemouth. They go after spots. They go after, maybe some smallmouth. They find lakes that are holding something that's a little more easy to catch. You guys are both professionals on the tour out here on the Apex Tour. And it doesn't matter what, lake you go to. If they go to a lake that if it's got largemouth in it, it's got largemouth in it, and you got to catch those. So why don't we talk a little bit about, how do you guys really get set up and prepare to get out on these lakes and catch largemouth bass in the wintertime in these cold waters? Let's pose
Nick.
that. Let's start off with Nick on that one.
No, when I go to lakes and specifically the lakes out here in California, Clear Lake, Berryessa, that have the predominantly largemouth, it all depends. On how cold it really is. That's how I'll kind of judge, what I'm going to be doing, where I'm going to be going, preferably deeper stuff, and just really slowing down. I like to go to Clear Lake in the wintertime and throw a big swim bait. As far as fun fishing, just to go catch a giant fish. I'll go up in Clear Lake in December, January, and I'll sit on, one or two rock piles and I'll throw a Huddleston all day just to get, that one or two big bites. But as far as about in a tournament setting, tournament mind, like if I had to go out and, to a largemouth lake right now and, try to weigh 5 big largemouth, the A-rig always comes to play, especially in these winter months, really dragging that thing along the bottom. That's what I like to do. I like to launch it out there, let it hit the ground, and I just slow roll it, pop here, pop there. And the Garmin Live Scope comes into play a lot when I'm doing that. I'm staring at that screen the whole time. I want to see what the fish are doing. I want to see how active they are, if they're following it, not committing, change sizes, change colors. Mm-hmm. And then a big jig always work in the wintertime. That's one of my favorites. Because it reminds me of punching on the Delta. You got that, the heavier jig, and you get to just whack them, and that's one thing I really enjoy.
Now, what do you when you say big jig like that? Are you talking about? Like you're throwing a 1 ounce jig? Are you throwing, or is it just like the skirt is a big, like a big presentation?
Yeah, like a big presentation. A 3/4 ounce. Like I said, I like to fish out deeper. Mm-hmm. I'll go to a 3/4 ounce, 1 ounce, and just drag that thing along the bottom, and it's what I love about it is when they smack it, boom, boom, and you got to give them the wood because, 20, 30, 40 feet down, you really got to crank down. It really reminds me of flipping out here on the river, when you get that boom, boom, and you just whack them and yank them out of there. That's just something I enjoy, and it catches big ones. Not only in the wintertime, but all year round. So if I had to go with my, top 3 baits, it'd be a big swim bait, an A-rig, and a jig. That's for sure.
And that's, and then Zach, and is that, does that work for you? Is that kind of where you're at too? Or what's your approach?
Yeah, I look at it a little bit different, I guess. I really love the A-rig, absolutely, in the wintertime. But I think I more base how I'm gonna target them kind of on a little bit more of where we're at in the winter, what the water looks like, and if I have a chance, if the water's coming up, or if it's high and a little bit off color, or you got any wood still in the water in the wintertime, or as it's coming up, flooding water.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go shallow in the morning or throughout the day, not so much in the morning, more as the day maybe gets warmer in the afternoon. But I'm gonna try to stay shallow and at least try to exploit those shallow fish that are moving up, because I think a lot of guys in the wintertime just feel like they have to go out deep and slow. I'm not saying fishing an A-rig out deep is not fishing deep and slow, and neither is a big jig. But I just think a lot of guys get the mindset that it's cold, it's winter, we have to go out and we have to just drag something super slow and just wait for a fish to bite it. And I kind of flip that, and I tend to fish a little bit maybe faster than a lot of guys will in the winter with a jerk bait, an A-rig, and a crankbait, and really try to chase those fish that want to be up shallow. And to me, those are the more aggressive fish anyway, and just be able to kind of cover more water that way, and really kind of get a mood of the fish. But some of my favorite baits for the wintertime is an A-rig, absolutely. Something that I can bang bottom in like 8 to 10 foot of water, from 0 to 10 foot of water with a crankbait. And then, I really like throwing a jerk bait in the wintertime too. And that's something that I can fish fast, but I can slow it down if the Garmin's showing me that the fish are just really lethargic and don't want to chase. But a lot of times it's just the mood of those shallow fish. You might run into a pocket that has a couple of degrees warmer water, a little bit dirtier water, maybe just something that, you might find zones of the lake that are a lot more prone to having those shallow fish. And then if I can't find those shallow fish, or it's just not really working out, you can always go shallow to deep, back and forth. And I noticed that in the wintertime, a lot of times in the morning, it's pretty slow. And as the day progresses and you get a little bit of warming, maybe the sun pops out a little bit, or just throughout the day, I've noticed a lot that the fish will get shallow later in the day. And it's something that largemouth particularly, they get around wood, they get around some main lake secondary point kind of stuff, and you can catch them up shallow. And I'd rather do that if I can, just because I feel like as soon as I go out in that 20, 30 foot, you're spending a lot more time on a spot just to get a couple good casts in. And if you don't know where the fish are, it's hard to kind of pinpoint them that way. So I tend to cover as much water as I can, a little bit faster, and try to make that happen.
Well, talking or listening to both of you say that thing, the one thing I really didn't hear about was really, other than maybe the jig, I guess you could, but there's no really finesse. There was no worm throwing, none of the small things, the floating flies, anything like that. Both of you seem to really look for that more of a reaction bite this time of year. And that just, I think for most anglers out there, when you think of, 40-degree water, you're not thinking, reaction. Is that really just a misnomer, and these fish are still going to react? I don't care who answers.
They're still going to react. They still have to eat. Their eating windows are a lot smaller than they would be in the spring, summertime, and fall. I've had great days out here on the Delta in December and January, where me and my brother, we won an ABA last year in December, and it was freezing, weighed like 26 pounds on a chatterbait. So I mean, they still are up doing it. It's just their windows are so small to really get those fish to feed.
Yeah, and it could be a lot more area oriented too, where you can't just expect to run the lake and catch fish, all over the place. But if you can spend a little bit of time covering water, you have more of a chance of finding those spots than if you just hunker down out deep. And And then again, we're talking about largemouth. We're not talking about spots. We're not talking about smallies. I mean, you can go, if you were targeting spots and you wanted to catch a ton of fish in the wintertime, you're going to be deeper because those spots aren't going to be as active up shallow as the largemouth will be. But
Okay.
I think the only misnomer to me is that without a lot of time on the water and experience fishing in the winter months, you just kind of go with the status quo. Everybody says you have to fish slow and deep, and so I think more guys are just prone to being in that mindset in the wintertime. And
you just feel like they kind of fall back into that. That's like, because that's like the, that's the thing that everybody talks about is oh, it's cold, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to, like Nick said, I'm going to go sit in 25, 30 feet of water and drag something around and hope that I drag it in front of the right fish. But the way you said that, both of you talking about the window being so small are, as far as the feeding. So I guess covering that much water and really focusing on making them react to something that's right there. How do you, I don't know how to ask this question, but how do you make them feed? How do you make them eat if you have just such a small window like that? How do you know when that window is?
That's the hard part. And I think if we were all to figure that out, we'd be doing pretty good. It's just a matter of, see, what I like to do, I like to find the biggest concentration of fish that I can find. Okay. You know what I mean? As far as running around the lake and fish here, fish here, fish here. Once I could find a big concentration, which is usually there's bait around, and that's where they're all kind of hunkered down. And that's when I'll start, I'll throw the A rig out, slow roll it on the ground, look at what they're doing. That's the best thing with this live scope. All the forward-facing sonars is if you have it and you use it correctly, you can learn a lot about what these fish do. And, that's what I was bringing it back to, slow rolling the A-rig by, watch what they do. Do they not even pay attention to it? Do they follow it? How close are they following it? Are they 5 feet back, or are they right on the, right behind it? Real interested. And that's what, I like to do. And I like to, once you find the bigger concentrations, it's easier to kind of break down and throw different baits. And I know you were mentioning finesse. Finesse does come into play. It's kind of a last resort. These fish won't move. They won't,
right.
They don't want anything big. They want something small and just kind of waved in front of their face. And, as tournament anglers, we can't always go out there and do what we want to do. We have to do what we, have to do to get these fish to bite. So finesse does come into play. It's not, I don't think, anybody's favorite. I know it's not mine, but I do it. The Nico rig has saved my butt many a times. So it's just a matter of the, looking at the fish and seeing what they're doing down there. Are they really active? Are they just real sluggish?
Right.
And then leave and come back. That's what I mean. I found this big concentration of fish in the morning. They're not eating right now. I'm going to go run around the lake, but I'm going to come back at noon, when the sun's up, and see.
Yeah. And that's probably the thing I was going to ask next was really, once you find a school of fish like that in the winter, I know in the summer, they're usually roaming, it's like, yeah, you found a school of fish, but it doesn't really mean anything. They're not going to be there 10 minutes from now. They're just moving around. In the winter, when you find that school of fish, when you find a good concentration, do you go back multiple times to try to get them to bite and figure out what time of day they're biting?
We have a process that we call simple price, simple process. And what that means is we take our lowest and best price and we post it on every single car. There's no back and forth. And by simple process, what that means is when you meet somebody, they can handle every aspect of what you do in your card transaction buying experience from beginning to end.
Yeah, no,
For me,
I would
absolutely.
think you do. Yeah, I think you do. And I think a lot of it is if you're able to, if there's a lake that you're fishing predominantly through the wintertime, the nice thing about finding those schools or the concentrations of fish is they're not really going to go very far. Like you say, In the summer, they might be roaming. They might, cover quite a bit of ground chasing bait. In the wintertime, the bait doesn't move as much, nor do the fish. So if you find that concentration, they might not be on the exact same point, but they might still be in the same creek, or they might be in the back a little bit one day, and they might move back towards the front of the cove, whatever. But those fish tend to stay throughout that really cold period between, December and late January. And you can kind of key that in, and then on consecutive trips back, realize, oh, they bit better in the afternoon here. A lot of times it does kind of pattern itself that way. And then, you get those, periods of wintertime where, not right now, obviously, but, where it'll be just cold and clear for a week or two, and then you get a storm. And those are the days that I look for, that if I was going to pick a day to go, I'd want to go out during that stormy period, not those necessarily just nice, warmer fishing days, because that's when, to me, those fish will move a little bit more shallow. The water is more likely to rise up and put some new cover in the water. And those fish, even when it's cold, they still like to rise up with that rising water. And so, that's something that I'm always looking for, are those transition days, those days when the fronts come through. It might not be the funnest day to be out there to fish, but it seems like, if you're going to get a better day in January, it's on a day when it's blustery and raining, as opposed to just a nice warm winter day.
Do you kind of agree with that, Nick, as far as the, what time, looking for maybe an incoming storm, or looking for the worse weather, the less comfortable the weather for you, the more, the better it is bite wise?
Absolutely. It's obviously good when you get a couple good days of sunshine to kind of heat up the water a little bit. And when I say a little bit, it's very, very small. But when you get these nice warm fronts or something that comes in where it's not, excruciatingly cold out there, that'll turn those fish on, and those feeding windows will get, pretty big. They'll push up shallow, the bait will move up. And you can have some really good days where, a big storm pushes in, and, like I mentioned earlier, I go to Clear Lake and I'll go, throw a big swim bait. And the best days that I've had in Clear Lake in the wintertime is when it was raining all day long, and those bigger fish just seem to want to move up. They get more active. I think the bait fish move around a lot more because they think they're hidden, with the low light conditions.
Right.
So I think it makes it easier for those bigger fish to target the bait fish because of the low light conditions, and it just gets them active. And it, I think they kind of know, okay, we could run up shallow, we could eat, and sneak up on our prey without using as much energy as if the sun was out.
No.
Yeah. Well, and one other thing too that I think is kind of I always hear people talk about, the bass's metabolism really slows down in the wintertime, and they don't need to eat as much, and yada yada, this and that. But if you think about it, what's coming up after winter for the bass's life cycle? It's the spawn. They need to be in prime shape for when that spawn kicks on, which is pretty much the first really warm, stable weather just after the days start getting longer. So if those fish aren't taking every opportunity that they do have to actually feed up in the wintertime, they're not going to be ready. The biggest fish you catch on any given lake, anywhere you're at, is that late February, or at least out here on the west, that late February period where, winter's almost over and those fish are just thick, fat, and, just huge, where you catch one in the wintertime, it'll be a 10-pounder. You catch that fish in June and it's like a 7-pounder. It's all that extra winter weight. And so, people that think they have to go out and drag stuff slow all the time and little baits, and, you might catch some of the smaller ones that way, and you may catch a big one on occasion, but that's why the guys that like to throw the big swim baits like Nick's talking about, they go out in the wintertime, because those fish might not be out there, chasing bait on the surface, but if a big profile bait goes by and they're up looking for food, they're just going to eat that thing. They're not going to swim up on it real fast. They're not going to be winding it real fast, but they're going to eat. And when those windows open, I mean, that's when it's happening. And all those big fish are eating in the wintertime. And so, it's just a matter of kind of preparing yourself mentally that you may have a slow day, but like Nick said, you go to Clear Lake with a swim bait in the wintertime, and you're likely to catch a big one. Or you go to the mother lode, and that's when you catch a teener on a big swim bait.
Right.
You're not going to catch those fish in June, even though those big fish are around. But all the little ones are so much more aggressive in the warmer periods. It seems to
Right.
me, and I've had on the Delta, like Nick said, I've had January days on the Delta where I had 30 plus pounds, and it doesn't happen very often, but when you find those bigger fish, it's like there aren't any little ones with them sometimes, because those big ones are up to eat. And if a 2-pounder gets in their way, they're going to eat it too. And it until you open your eyes and actually spend some time doing it, you might just be out there dragging a worm, not even knowing what you're missing yet.
Right. Now, one of the things, where you guys both kind of went with that too. And one of the things I think a lot of people get a little afraid of is the new watercolor. We're in the middle of some big storms here. Water's finally coming up in our lakes, but across the country, there's a lot of shallow lakes and they have that. When you're talking about fishing up shallow now, do you really pay attention to structure at that point? Is it something that I've got to go out and find something, or are these fish roaming? Is it important to the fish that they have structure to go off of, or are they going to be out in that water muddy as heck and they're still out there on the points? They're still up there in shallow water that doesn't have any kind of structure, or are they going to focus more on the bigger rock or the grass line that might be there if there's still grass left in a lake, or structure, wood, whatever? I mean, if you're the average person going out there to fish, I mean, what are you going to tell them? It's like, hey, you know what, if you can find this, go look for it. Or is it solely, go buy some good electronics and look around?
Well, I would say the biggest thing to me is a fish likes structure and cover no matter what time of the year it is, except for maybe in the fall when they're just out chasing bait in 60 foot of water,
Right.
And so to me, I'm always trying to look for the irregularities. A lot of our lakes around here have a lot of rock, a lot of natural rock. So, if you're not on the Delta and even a Clear Lake, there's a lot of natural rock. So the rock's going to heat up, keep a little bit of warmth, and the fish are going to relate to it, and it gives them something to hide up against. But, most of the time I'm trying to fish transitions. If it's like gravel to rock, or I'm fishing the larger boulders on a rock bank, or I'm fishing that, I'm concentrating on concentrating on the isolated cover that I see as I'm going down the bank. And again, if I'm actively going down banks looking for fish in a little bit dirtier water, I'm probably more trying to focus on what watercolor I'm getting bit on, and then around what kind of cover I might be generating those bites off of, more than just the cover itself, if that makes sense. Because you might have one area of the lake that has a larger runoff coming in during the wintertime, where or a creek, that just tends to run muddy, so that water is going to stay a little bit dirtier. So that water is going to be just a little bit warmer, and it's going to give those fish a sense of security to be up shallow. If you're in a lake that's just really clear and it's in the wintertime, those fish will still push up shallow, but they're not going to be as willing to stay up there and chase baits as they will when the water gets a little bit dirtier. So if you're prone to only fishing a super clear lake, not Clear Lake itself, but a lake that has clear water, so some of this stuff's going to change. That's when I'm going to go more to like a jerk bait, and the A-rig when it's clearer, and when it starts to get that dirtier color, that's when I'm going to more work in the crankbait. And an A-rig with larger blades, or working an A-rig with larger swim baits, something that gives a little bit more vibration, that kind of thing, or a bigger jerk bait even. But
and Nick, is that kind of your same take on that?
Yeah. So when the water gets really dirty like this, for me, I'll use the Delta as an example. I mean, right now it is a mud pit. Right now, if I had to go out there, I was talking to somebody, said, hey, I'm going out today. What should I do? What should I look for? What should I throw? these fish, when that water gets really dirty like that, and in my personal experience in the wintertime, is usually when we get a lot of that muddier water and it's a lot colder. Those fish, they move up really shallow. And people, that's the other thing is, they think it's wintertime. I got to go out deep. I got to do so. The Delta is a shallow water fishery no matter what. Right. They are not the top of the food chain. They can't just, do what they want out there because you have sea lions, you have, 30, 40 pound stripers that will pick them off if they go out into deep water. So regardless of what's happening, when that water gets real muddy, they still have to eat. You know what I mean? Their best shot of getting something to eat is going up really, really shallow and throwing a big spinner bait, like even a red and black spinner bait, something that's going to stomp that, but still has the color to where, once they can track it, they can start to see it, when visibility is basically not even existent at that point because it's so muddy. At least if they can get close enough and feel the vibration, they could see just a little bit of red flash or, a chartreuse, just something that really bright.
Something that stands out a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. Something that gives off a lot of wake, something that, they could track down. And once they get close enough, they could see it. As far as cover, I've done really good flipping toolies with a black and blue jig. It's really slow. I mean, you're not going to get a whole lot of bites, but once you do, they're typically the larger class. Yeah. Because they have to be. They're not going to be really suspended in the toolies. They're going to be sitting at the bases. Kind of not really moving, just waiting for something to go by their face. They don't. The water's really cold. It's really muddy. They don't want to use a lot of their energy. So if you can hop something in front of their face and basically dead stick it, which is hard to do out here because the live scope works very well in the lakes and it does work out here. But when you get into that really shallow, it's really hard to utilize it, especially with grass and stuff like that. But yeah, a big jig, black and blue Senko always works out here. Spinner baits, chatter baits, something that moves, gives off, good vibration. And even LV 500.
Bass U, folks. Information is pouring over. If you want to learn more about every lake, how to fish shallow, deep, in between, skipping docks and rocks and cranking, slow wiggling, chatter, smattering, you get it at Bass U. We got the best of the best. If somebody's ever caught a bass on something and perfected the technique, we got you covered. Get on Bass U TV, check it out, sign up, be a member, be part of it, folks. Keep learning. I'm Gerald Swindle. Subscribe to Bass U.
I was going to ask that question because that's one of the baits that I think in the wintertime I hear or see a lot of all of a sudden is the LV 500s, the rattle traps, the things like that. And I guess that leads me to another question is how much does, sound in this time of year or color, kind of compare some of those things because, you're talking a lot of black and blues, you're talking a lot of the reds, that, things like that, as we do get a little bit more stain in the water, obviously from, the rains coming in and dirtying up the waters and all that. How much difference does it make with color and sound right now as compared to, in the summer days where they can see, 10 or 15, 20 feet, whatever.
Well, I think, I think it's a day-to-day thing for me more than anything. And again, it's the insights that I've gained by using the Garmin Live Scope is that, I've seen days throughout the year where, they want it loud or they don't want it loud. And you can literally watch it on your screen sometimes, how the fish react to one bait versus another, or the sound or the cadence. But in the wintertime, when it's dark water, murky water, runoff and all that kind of stuff, I tend to always start with something noisy. But if I'm not getting the results or I'm seeing fish just follow it or I'm just, not really seeing a lot of followers that aren't committing, I'll switch it up. And there's been times when they want something real silent. And there's times when they want it just obnoxiously loud. And they make they make one knockers, they make the ones with the BBs, they make all that kind of stuff now, and a variety of different baits now, whether it be a vibrating bait or a jerk bait or a crank bait. And so, you know, you kind of gotta experiment with it. But to me, I'm going to start with a loud, obnoxious bait in the wintertime. A fun thing that I like to do in the winter on lake is the Delta, Clear Lake, is if I'm fishing a jerk bait up shallow and you're throwing it up underneath docks or around docks and it's calm outside, you can hear your jerk bait from a long ways off, and you can rip it down and you can listen. And I've had days on the Delta and Clear Lake where I'll rip it down and just let it sit, and I'll wait to hear it make that noise without me moving it, because that's the fish coming up while it's just dead stick. And I've had quite a few days where I'll throw it out there and jerk it down and just wait and let that pause last as long as it needs to hear a fish bite my jerk bait. And I mean, no joke. And that was before I had live scope, to where I can do that now, and I can let it sit and just wait. I don't have to listen for it, and you can see the fish move up on it. And sometimes it takes, 8, 10, 15 seconds for a fish to just stand there and look at your jerk bait before it'll eat it. But a lot of times, it'll be a fairly good sized fish that does that. The little ones tend to grab it, pretty regularly when you can get on a jerk bait bite. But to me, the sound, I'm always going to start noisy, and I'm always going to, if it's not working, I'll just start subtly changing it up, or softer jerks so it doesn't make quite as much of a ruckus. That kind of thing. With the yo-yo and the LVs and stuff, sometimes you just want to lift it. You don't really want to rip it up so it doesn't have to make a lot of noise. It just makes a little bit more, it makes some noise, but not as much as you can make with it. Yeah. Little subtle things like that you kind of pick up over time, but it's all experimenting, there was a trip not a couple years ago, Nick and I took to a lake where we were throwing the LVs, and it was like one spot, one guy'd be catching them, the other spot, the other guy'd be catching them. We must have been doing something just a little bit different with the rod, to where one school of fish would want to fire on one guy's bait, and then the next school of fish would fire on a different, and it's funny how it works that way. Same with shaking worms. Sometimes the guy will shake a worm just the right way, and he's catching them out of the back of the boat, and you can't seem to get bit, And sometimes it can be that subtle of a difference, and you don't even know you're doing it. But it's just all experimentation. But noise, I start with noise first. What about you, Nick?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't go wrong with trying to get them to react, and especially with muddier water, giving them something with some noise, like a LV 500 or a rattle trap. It's not a bad way to start. Me personally, I've had a hatred towards treble hook baits up until a couple of years ago. So I always like to start with, I feel like sometimes, and this is shallow water, I feel like if I could catch them on a square bill crankbait or something along those lines, I can catch them on a chatterbait. And the only reason I would much rather catch them on a chatterbait is I have one single hook, a large 4/0 mustad, versus a couple of tiny treble hooks. I've just had my heart broken plenty of time. And go ahead, chime in, Zach. I don't change my treble hooks.
I wasn't going to say nothing. I wasn't going to say nothing.
But since I've started fishing this Apex, where I've kind of had to learn all these, a lot of these lakes I've never been to, and throwing a crankbait has definitely been one of my favorite things to do nowadays, and it's helping me out. I got some great advice from Zach to change my treble hooks out every so often, and that's been helping me out a lot. But noisy baits like the LV 500 and rattle trap, they do work, and I love to throw an LV 500 on Clear Lake, especially in these colder months. Kind of in the muddier water, it's what was it? There was a tournament, was it like last year or something? Me and Joey Skim were fishing Clear Lake in the wintertime, and it was muddy, and we were throwing LVs, but we were throwing like ghost minnow and stuff like that, stuff that was very translucent. And I switched over to an all white with chartreuse and just started wrecking them. And we've been sitting on the spot. I was looking at these fish the whole time, and we just couldn't get them to go. And I just so happened to cut it off, switch on an all white with chartreuse on it, and just started wrecking them. So color has look at the water.
Yeah.
Water clarity has a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes it's a little bit of both is the overall to it. It's like, yeah, so you got to get something they can see, but you also have to get something they can hear, and that betters your chances of getting bites, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and that basically falls back to what I was saying about the spinnerbait, where they could feel, they have a sense that something's in the area, but now you have a bright enough color to where they could kind of pinpoint it if it gets close enough to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and for the guys that are listening to this that aren't from the West Coast, they might be thinking about an LV and not really realizing what we're talking about by using it. But we're not just in the wintertime. Very rarely am I just reeling a rattle trap or a LV or whatever lipless bait back. Guys always talk about ticking the grass and ripping it out, and you get that bite when you're ripping it out. Well, what a lot of the guys out here do is we'll fish lakes, whether it has grass, rock, a lot of times mostly with grass, but we're actually letting that bait settle on the bottom, and we're fishing it back almost like you're stroking a jig, where you're just lifting and dropping and lifting, and it's kind of a constant yo-yo of that LV. So it's reenacting how you would be fishing it over a grass flat if you were ripping it out of the grass as it's hitting it, but we're making it do that cadence over and over, and it's a really, really productive technique out here on lakes, and even lakes like Clear Lake that get a huge amount of fishing pressure, and guys will be throwing that LV from the north to the south end, all the way in between, and those fish, it's just something that really, really gets them to fire, especially when the water temps get down cold in the wintertime, especially when it starts to just turn around in the spring. But it's something that a lot of guys hear about, and I don't, unless, like I said, you're on a couple lakes here in Northern California, it seems like a lot of guys just don't really utilize that technique as much as they probably could on all kinds of lakes all over the country.
Well, I mean, that's why we're here. Let's help them, get out there and try this technique, get out, because it's really interesting to me that both of you guys, talked about this really shallow fishing in waters that are going to be in the 40s, and for most of the winter we're going to be in most of our waters get in the 40s. I don't think any place that we fish really, or that you guys fish, really gets too much colder than that. I'm not seeing a bunch of freezing over water here in California, but
No.
one of the big, with the chatterbaits, you're still fishing those, just bringing them through the water, but you're just slowing them down a little bit or things like that. And then you're talking about this, the LV 500s or the rattle traps or things like that, the different baits out there, and, matching color, matching, giving them sound, giving them all these things to react to. With largemouth, it is different because, the spots are a little more aggressive in the colder water. They don't really care. Smallmouth are the same kind of way. They're a little more like that, but with largemouth, and it's such a big thing out here to try to fish for largemouth, and if you're on a waterway or you're in a tournament somewhere and you've got spots or you've got, smallmouth, people I think will really tend to point towards those because they'll be more aggressive, but trying to find this largemouth. And I think the lake around here that's the most for us is Lake Berryessa. And it's it's a lake that has all three species. They're very prevalent. There's a lot of them in that lake. How difficult is it when the bite's slow for, you guys are, for those of you out there who don't know these two guys, they are both very good, very, very good fishermen on the Delta. They've won events there. They've done, they do this where it's their home water, and they both fish in grass and for largemouth predominantly just because that's what's in there. But when you take them to a lake like, Berryessa, and you say, hey, I am only going to target largemouth, What's the difference? Is it a bait difference? Is it a structure difference? Is it what makes you just go, okay, I'm going to target largemouth. This is what I'm going to throw. Let's talk to Nick. Let's ask Nick on that one, because he loves the Delta. So I'd love to hear how he approaches something like that.
Well, I do love the Delta, and punching and flipping is my absolute favorite thing in the world. And don't be fooled if you go to lakes. You can do the same things there. A Berryessa, when it's full and it has a lot of down trees, it has trees that are sticking out of the water. If I were to go to Berryessa and predominantly target largemouth, and we had full water, that's the main thing. I mean, there's some trees that are in the water right now. I was up there not too long, a couple of days ago actually, and you can flip those trees, and about 80% of the time you're going to get largemouth. I've had times where I flipped the trees and I've caught smallies, or I've caught a spot here, but I'm predominantly on the north end of the lake. I see a lot more, the 3 to 6 pound range largemouth, being up that direction. Not saying, I've caught them in the narrows, I've caught them on the south end of the lake, but, flipping tends to attract those largemouth more than the smallies of the spots. So predominantly, if I'm going to be doing that, I will try to find, lay down trees are sticking out of the water. Go to a Bass Pro Shops. What are those fish doing? They're all hanging out in those trees, right? It's just something they love to do. The largemouth stay in the trees no matter what. Even if I was to go to Shasta, and you said, hey, I want you to go and catch a largemouth.
Yeah.
I'm going to go up the Pitt River arm or the Squaw arm where the trees are.
Right.
Because that's predominantly where I've caught largemouth. Yeah. So I like to flip. A chatterbait always works up shallow or around the trees. But yeah,
now
I like if I'm.
Now you just said you're flipping, and then you're flipping a chatterbait. What are you doing with that?
So if I'm in an area where there's a lot of standing trees or brush piles, and I'm talking shallow water, 10 foot or less, and I have the ability to fling a chatterbait in between these bushes or trees. Okay. So, when I'm coming into an area, no matter where it is, what time of the year it is, I will always throw a reaction bait in front of the trees or the grass. You know what I mean? I always want to see if I could pick something off, or if I can get them to, react before I move my boat into position and sitting real close to the structure.
Right.
It's panned out very good for me. Up until today, I still do the same things, on the Delta, anywhere. So I'll throw that in there, and then I'll get in there and start flipping.
I thought maybe I just got you to show us some, really secret thing you were doing with chatterbaits.
No, but you can yo-yo a chatterbait like you can an LB. That's for sure too. But the only difference that I would say to that is, I agree with the trees, I agree with the standing cover and all that kind of stuff. But the biggest thing is if you want to go target largemouth in those lakes with the mixed schools of fish, having all 3 species or 2 species, like Shasta. I mean, Shasta has all 3, but very few smallmouth compared. The biggest thing is if you're out with your electronics, you're using your side scan or your forward facing, whatever, and you're scoping around and you see large groups of fish, most of the time, those are going to be your spots. You find small packs of 3 to 5, or, you see a few fish on a tree here, and then you go down a ways, you see a couple more fish on a tree. To me, those are the largemouth that I'm targeting. And so, you have to kind of separate yourself from looking for big numbers of fish versus, how they're relating to stuff. And the largemouth in the spots, sometimes they'll be all together, but sometimes they won't. And like if you go to a place like Clear Lake, which is predominantly largemouth, or the Delta, any fish you see are pretty much going to be largemouth unless you find schools of striper or something weird at the Delta.
Right.
So, and then the other thing is, if you're out fun fishing and you just want to go catch fish on those lakes, you're probably going to end up targeting spots because, like you say, they're more aggressive, but you're going to catch a lot more small fish. And so if you really want to key in on the largemouth, you're going to get less bites, but you're going to cover more water for less bites, but you're probably going to have a better average size fish. And that's where in a tournament situation, that's why it may be important to just chase those largemouth, because if you're catching on average a 2-pound fish for a largemouth, but you're only catching 1.5 pounds for the spots, you don't have to go through nearly as many fish. But it's more keeping your head down and hustling and not just settling for, I found a school of spots, let's work on these for a while and finish the limit out when you know you're going to call them out anyway. It's just, and Shasta is notorious for that. I mean, you can go to Shasta and you could target largemouth and you may not catch any. You may catch a couple, but if you catch 5 largemouth in a day, you're most likely going to be having a better bag than a guy who caught 50 spots, and so it just kind of comes back to what your goal is at the end of your day and how much work you're willing to put into catching those fish, because it's not that easy to put your trolling motor on 80 and burn 10 miles of bank in a day, as opposed to going out and fishing main lake points out in 40 foot and dragging your shaky head through it and getting bit every other cast, because that can be fun, but it all depends on what you want to work on, and sometimes for me, I spent years going to Shasta and getting my butt kicked by who I call like worm draggers. And I tried to be one, right? I was like, oh, well, you go out to Shasta and, you fish all day. And if you catch 100 fish, I'm going to catch 5 2-pounders. Well, no, you're not. I mean, you might, but most likely you're going to end up with 7, 8 pounds like everybody else,
right.
And you go out and you put your trolling motor down and you throw reaction all day. You might only catch 8 or 9 fish, but there's a good chance you throw a largemouth or 2 in there with them, better size spot. All of a sudden you've got 12 pounds, and you're up there, with a chance of catching a big one. And, it's just a matter of, I think again, it's more what your experience level has gotten you to. And for me, I've gone from being the guy who was really into finesse because I could get a lot of bites to realizing that number of bites wasn't equating to a high tournament finishes, to turning back around to putting my trolling motor down and just burning bank and knowing that I'm going to get less opportunities, but I'll have opportunities at better fish. And since I've done that, it's hard to go back to not just targeting largemouth as much as I can. And you go to a place like Shasta, those bigger spots are going to act a little bit more like a largemouth because they're going to be more aggressive and willing to get up shallow, and get on that isolated cover or be on the prime spot up shallow, but if you go to a place like Berryessa, you're going to catch mostly largemouth if you do that. And they're going to be some good sized fish. Same with Maloney's, same with Don Pedro, same with a lot of those lakes that have the mixed schools of fish.
Yeah, I was going to say, Nick, do you kind of agree with that? Just covering water is less productive, but more inclination that you're going to get bigger fish. If you're not first, you're last, right? So, are you going to go out there and do that same thing in a tournament? Is just hopefully I catch 5 doing this?
Tired of searching through ads to find bass articles in your favorite fishing magazine? Well, we have a solution for that. Introducing Bass Angler Magazine with over 30 articles in every issue, filled with tips and techniques to help you catch more fish. Follow the pros as they publish the most up-to-date seasonal methods to catching bigger bass. Whether you're a beginner or professional angler, make Bass Angler Magazine part of your gear today. Be a part of the fastest growing bass publication in the nation. Log on to bassanglermag.com with code TV and save 20% when you subscribe now.
I agree. That's your best shot, and I tell myself that at Shasta all the time, like you got to just keep moving, but it's really stressful. You want to stick to it and you want to keep doing it. That's like the big swim bait thing. Like I would love to win a tournament on a big swim bait, but it's way too stressful to do because, it could be noon and you haven't even been touched And
Right.
you know what I mean? You could burn down the bank and, you know, catch one here, catch one there, and here's noon, and you have 2 fish, and it can really stress you out. That's where, you know, dragging a worm or something like that, you're catching them pretty consistently throughout the day. But in your mind, you know that
you're doing the wrong thing.
The chances that you're going to end up, you know, just hitting a magic spot of 3-pounders or something is just very slim. And you're going to get your teeth kicked in by somebody who's throwing a reaction bait. A lot of those bigger spots, and I know here we go about spots and stuff like that, but up in those colder lakes they're suspended. So reaction, just throwing a trolling motor down in the wintertime and hauling down the bank with a reaction bait. It's your best bet to get those, you know, quality fish in the tournament. It's just hard because you're probably not going to get a whole lot of those bites.
Yeah.
So what you guys are basically saying is that if you're going out to fun fish, take your finesse rod in the wintertime, go out and catch whatever's there or whatever you can. If you're out there maybe fishing for bigger fish, or you're fishing a tournament session, leave those in the box till you have to fill out that limit or something. I mean, and then maybe pick that up. And
well, what I'm saying is if you want to get to that level where you know that you can go out and catch the better fish, you have to do that when you're out fun fishing. Because if you get caught in the I'm just going to go out and fun fish, it doesn't really matter, and all you do is target what's easiest to catch, you're going to get really complacent in that frame of mind, you know. And then when the first time you go out, if you say you're a weekend angler and you want to start fishing tournaments, you better start now learning those things that you're going to do in the tournaments, and don't even bother, to me, going out and trying to figure out how to drop shot if you don't have to, you know, because you can figure that out on a tough day when your reaction bite dies. But to go figure out a reaction bite when you're used to predominantly drop shotting is extremely difficult, and it's almost all mental. It's almost all, I should have 5 fish by now, I'll go back and do this, and you're always looking to go backwards, not forwards, in my opinion. But and then in terms of, I want to give Nick a big props because, at a couple of the Apex events, like when we went to Mojave, that lake has largemouth, has smallmouth, has good size of both, and it was tough. We were there in late winter time, so it wasn't really like it was off the hook. Water was like 40-foot visibility, crazy. And, he was able to just find something and then hunker down and caught largemouth. Didn't even catch that many number-wise, but caught big ones, make the top 10, And so sometimes, he kind of mixed a little bit of both in there, and he knew how to get bit, but he knew what to look for the largemouth, and it ended up making him a top 10, And so it's not that you always have to be throwing something big and loud either. So we didn't know going into Mojave what it was really going to be like. You launch your boat, you look down and it's 40-foot visibility, and the water temp was what, 48 to 50 degrees or something like that. It's like, so, that's where just having a lot of time on the water kicked in. And, I won't give away what he was throwing unless he wants to, but it's something that a guy wouldn't necessarily think he's going to be targeting largemouth for, but he ended up catching you caught a couple 6-pounders or a 6 and a 5 or something like that, So
I think I caught a 5 and a 6,
Yeah. So there's always an exception to the rule, but to me, to answer that last question, if you're out fun fishing in the wintertime and you're not trying to figure out how to target the bigger fish with a moving bait, there's never a better time to put in that work, because you're not going to want to do it when the money's on the line and you've never done it before. And then you're going to find out, oh, so-and-so wanted throwing a jerk bait and a crankbait. And then it's like, well, where was he throwing it? How many bites did he get? And then you're just starting from scratch, not having any clue what he was really doing, So to me, now's the time to go out and do that, just go out, and because there's nothing all you're going to lose is you're not really losing anything, but you're just losing a little bit of time. And so you don't catch any fish that day. But the whole point of, if you want to become a tournament angler, you have to always be willing to put in the work. And that's on days when it's nice, days when it's cold, days when it's raining, because inevitably you're going to drop money on an entry fee, and it's going to be during a time of the year that you don't want to be at a certain lake. And you're not just going to say, if you're the kind of guy that just says, oh, I'm not going because it's going to be raining this weekend, then you probably are trying to use, you're doing the wrong hobby because it's too expensive to just throw money away.
So, I was going to say, if you want to go out and you want to be broke, you want to have no time, you want your spouse to not like you that much because you're spending all your time on the water, then listen to these two guys, because they're going to tell you how to do that.
Well,
because that's what tournament fishing really comes down to.
Anybody who
right?
wants to do that, anybody who wants to do that, I got a boat for sale. So
right.
come join the party.
You've had that boat. You've had that boat for sale for a while, though. So
I know. I put it up at the complete wrong time.
Yeah,
it happens. But no, I mean, it's the guys that are listening to this. I would assume are either tournament anglers, club anglers, whatever level of tournament you fish. There's no reason to let your competition have an advantage over you. Is the way I look at it. So the more tricks you have up your sleeve, the better. The better time to get the tricks is to go out and put the work in, and and a lot of tournament organizations start their seasons at the end or just during January, February, and so it's something that most guys across the country have to do, and so there's no better time to do it than when you're just out fun fishing.
Well, let me interject this.
Put the spinning rods down, people. Put the spinning rods down. Pretty much.
Hey, I threw mine out of the boat last week, so I'm good. So basically, this is one of the things that I was kind of going to go away on this for largemouth and fishing this kind of water. Fishing this time of year, in the Januaries and the Februaries, if you're going out for fun, which is kind of contradictory because like you talk about, it's raining. It's California, so we don't always get rain. This is kind of a weird year, but it's raining, it's cold, your hands are going to get numb, that sort of thing. But you're going to go out and practice. And a lot of time, or you're going to just, hey, I want to go have some fun. If you're going to go have some fun, you're probably not going to be fishing this time of year anyways, if you're just fishing for fun. But targeting this time of year when those fish are starting to feed up for the spawn, even though it's 3 months away, it's 3, maybe 4 months on some waters, but it's one of those things that you may as well go now and learn how to catch bigger fish early in the year. Because would you agree that once June, July, August come along, even though those are the great times to go out, it's warm, it's sunny, you can jump in the water, if you get too hot or whatever, even though those are really nice times to fish, they're not necessarily the best times to catch the biggest fish of the year.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're going to catch your biggest fish January, February. My biggest, the biggest fish I've ever caught was almost 13, and I caught it during the spawn. But besides that one fish, the fish that I've caught that were 10 to 11 pounds, that just short of that, have almost all been January, February, or March. That early pre-spawn where those fish are big. Now I've caught fish with bodies that were much bigger. Fish that had huge bodies that if I had caught that in the wintertime or early in the spring, who knows how big it would have been, right? But they don't weigh the same. So if you're going by weight, if you're in a kayak tournament, the long 2.5 footer is perfect, right? But if you're fishing a tournament for weight, you want those bigger fish. And if you want to catch one that you actually bragging rights, if you watch the internet and you're looking at fish pictures, most guys with giant fish have rain gear on. Most guys with giant fish have hoodies, or they have sock hats and gloves on, and that's because they're fishing in the cold winter time period, and that's just the way it is. So that's when you're going to catch your biggest one, I think, and that's why I get excited about going out when it's cold and windy, and I'll just make sure I bundle up and get ready, and with the rain gear they have now, you can do about anything you need to,
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you guys this, because both of you being Delta guys, it's we're in cold, it's muddy. How much flipping, punching the grass, the mats, how much does that right now, this is for the California guys that want to fish this stuff, how much does that really play in right now? Nick, I mean,
Nick knows what I would say. Nick knows what I would say. Let me jump you. Personally, I have ways that I fish at the Delta that I don't like to punch in the wintertime.
I know, but we don't like to use. Not everybody likes to use bobbers and minnows. So
I'm just saying, no, I don't use bobbers. I'm using artificials, but there's some things that I do on the Delta, and to me, I tend to put my flipping stick away in the wintertime.
Really?
And I'll still be good, and I'll do other stuff, and we're not going to mention it. But Nick, I know Nick has a different point of view on that. So
you're gonna wait a minute. You're gonna hold back on what you. I mean, come on. How hard is it to say? Huh? I was gonna say, how hard is it to say Senko? Come on.
No. All I'll say is I throw moving baits in the wintertime that constantly move. They don't stop. They just keep moving.
Well, that could be anything, Zach. We're trying to.
I was going to say
what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's a tidal system. Everything's moving when you put it in the water.
Yeah, everything's moving.
That's all I'll say.
Wow. Okay, everybody just heard it. Zack Thompson held back on us.
How about this? But I'll throw it. I'll throw it on the new Legend Tournament Bass grass handle mid swimmer rod, which is an awesome rod. And I know Alex Neopis is on recently, and you guys were talking about pistol grip swim bait rods. And just to clarify, it's got like a Glock pistol on the handle where your finger trigger would be. So you can throw big baits on a rod and be able to keep your rod in line with your hand. And it really helps to handle those big glide baits, those big swimmers, and all that kind of stuff.
So it's not the Gary Klein first ever classic pistol grip handle.
No, this actually looks like you're holding an AR-15, but it's got a 18-inch cork handle behind it and a 7'10" rod in front of it.
So they're going for gun enthusiasts on top of fishing guys. I get it.
But it works. It works really. It's called the grass handle. Legend Tournament Bass came out with it. It was best in show last year for ISE, and it's a great large bait rod, and I'll just leave it at that. That's my arsenal in the winter.
All right, now let's hear Nick's. Let's see how much he holds back on what he does at the Delta this time of year.
I'm flipping. I'm flipping. I'm punching.
And I can't.
Don't stop.
And I love to punch, and I can't. He'll call me and tell me, and I'll be like, "You got to be kidding!" Because about the time end of October, like mid-November hits, whatever I'm doing punching just goes away, and Nick will just, I don't know what he does, I don't know where he goes. He's got a whole different program, and he'll send me pictures. It's like, are you kidding me? But yeah, so
you're conceding right now that Nick's a better Delta fisherman than you.
I'm conceding.
The mayor of the Delta of the Frank's track is less of a fisherman than Nick Cloutier. That's what you're saying right now. I just want to get it on record.
I'm gonna say that over the last few years, Nick is absolutely a better puncher than I am. But part of it, and just to give myself a little bit of leeway, I've found other ways to approach the Delta than I used to. So I've kind of broadened what I do on the Delta, but it hasn't really shown a lot of tournament success over the last few years either. So I may have to go back. But I'm kind of like Rick Clem when he stopped going to the Classic, he just started going for the win. So I've not done what I used to do all the time by trying to find new stuff to do, and it just hasn't quite panned out like I would like yet. But I personally don't punch in the wintertime. I'll just tell you that. I don't. Maybe I should. Obviously, I probably should.
The technique that he does in the wintertime is very effective. And what was it, championship last year?
Yeah.
He beat me and I was flipping. So, I mean, we both made top 10s, but he ended up, fourth place?
Yeah, and the funny part was, Nick and I have been traveling together the last few years when we travel. And so we met up before that tournament, and we were pre-fishing kind of together, running some different stuff and checking this and that out. And he had a good practice. He had some areas that he knew he could catch some good fish, and I was kind of still scratching my head a little bit. And I told him the night before the tournament, I said, I'm going here. Haven't been there yet this year. And it's either going to happen or it didn't, and it happened. And so, but it's one of those things that, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And it happened to work that time. But yeah, you can tell him anything you want about punching in the winter, because I'd love to take some notes.
Punching in the winter it's great. It's not amazing, but
are you still punching the same stuff in the winter that you are in the spring and summer?
Yeah, Nick. What kind of stuff do you punch?
I swear to God, Zach, I know exactly what you do, and I will tell everybody right now. I'd say October through late November is probably the best time to just hammer some big ones. Not a lot of guys are doing it when it gets cold. Everybody goes back into that mentality that I got to pick up a spinning rod. Oh, I got to go deeper. I got to, and this is specifically on the Delta. Guys tend to do that. A 5-inch Senko, drop shot, jerk bait. No, I'm not doing any of that. If I could find some clean grass, the main ticket is finding clean hydrilla clumps. And when I say hydrilla clumps, I mean very small. Those big fish
not the vast mats of it, right?
Yeah, I'm not talking about you go down turn down a levee, and for 3 miles there's a grass mat running all the way down. There probably is fish in there, but they're going to be condensed into one area, and you're going to spend a lot of time running, and then the tide's going to change, and you're all messed up. No, I'm talking about just clumps of grass, some the size of a car, some the size of a small desk. That's what those big fish are doing. They're sitting in there, they're eating crawdads. And if anybody's been out flipping or punching in the last couple of years, you've seen a mass increase of crawdads. And those bass are loving it. A big key to when I'm flipping in the colder months is if I flip in and as soon as my bait hits the top of the mat, a crawdad scurries out. Okay, there's life there. So if there's life, roaming around, there's life roaming around underneath,
right,
eating these things. You know what I mean? And I spent a lot of time out here, so I have areas that I go to specifically for these types of months. I'm not saying it works everywhere.
Yeah, it does not work.
It's all a matter of it's just a matter of how much time you put into this river.
Yep.
And it's I'll leave it at that. It's just a matter of putting the time in and finding these certain areas during these colder months that harbor these bigger fish and the vegetation that you need. And the dead hyacinth, I've watched so many people, I don't even care. I'll drop it out there.
Oh.
People drive by dead stuff thinking, they sprayed it. Oh my God, it's dead. Oh my God. That stuff is like a heating blanket for these bass. And dead lay down toolies, everything.
Well, what's funny is, the Delta is such its own character too, and a lot of people fish it and a lot of guys do well. And a lot of the guys that do well do it completely different, and one guy will have one program, another guy will have another. One guy will fish, 80 miles away from the other guy and maybe be doing the same thing. People ask me all the time, cause I love to punch when it's warm. And I'll keep a flipping stick in my hand a lot when it's warm. I just don't tend to. I've never really had a good success doing it in the winter, and I found other things to do, and so that's what I do. But people ask me all the time, like, what do you go look for in the summer or when it's warm? and you could tell a guy exactly what to look for, and he can go out and not catch anything. You know,
I've seen that firsthand.
It's really, you know, so it sounds so simple, you know, but it's not. And it goes for a lot of these other things, you know, just fishing the lakes, you know, knowing what kind of reaction bait to throw, you know, knowing if you should be throwing this color crankbait versus this color, you know, it all kind of, it just comes down to your experiences. And that's, you know, where I go back to putting in the time and experimenting with all these different things, you know, and it can't just be for like an hour when you go out, you know, but it also has to, the conditions have to be right for it too. So you might go out one day and need to throw the A-rig, you know, for those deeper largemouth on Berryessa, or you may have to go to the LV, or you may have to go to the flipping the trees, or, you know, but it all boils down to time on the water, you know, and for me and Nick, for the amount of time that we've gotten to spend on the place like the Delta, just gives us an inherent understanding of what's going on, where we can drive down a levee and see what the water looks like on the rocks, and automatically like know, oh, there's 10 other spots I could go fish right now. Or you pull up to an area you haven't been to yet that year, and you see how the grass is growing, and you know immediately that it's either going to be good or bad. You know, it's not even like you don't even have to check a notebook. It's just a thing you see, and guys are like that on all different kinds of lakes. It's just a matter of how much time you spend there, and it can be a blessing and a curse. But on the Delta, it tends to be more of a blessing, you know. And so when Nick talks about flipping in the wintertime, there's a very select, small group of people that can do that. And he makes it sound like it's so good, but it's good for him, and it can be good for other guys, but it is not an easy thing to go figure out and do. And it is not the kind of thing, I mean, you could go out for 3 days in a row and not even catch one, the kind of thing, you know, but you could be fishing against him, and he'll come in with 22 pounds when you have 8 pounds, and you'll be like, how did you do that? You know, and he's like, just one rod, that's all I had, that's all I needed, you know. And so, you know, fishing is so mental, and a lot of it is something like that. When you're flipping all day and you know you're going to get 5 bites, it's like throwing that big swim bait all day, you know. But, you know, like Nick's talking about having a little bit of a mental block about throwing a swim bait all day because he might not get bit by noon, but he could have the flipping stick in his hand until noon and know that it's not quite right yet, and all he needs is a half an hour when the tide's right, and he's going to be fine. And that's how some guys look at swim baits or anything else, you know.
Right.
And it goes back to targeting largemouth. You know, if you're targeting largemouth all day, you know, the chances of you catching 5 of them are much higher when you expect to catch those 5 and don't really care what time of the day it happens, you know. And it works wherever you go, whatever you're doing. It's a lot of it is just mental, you know, keeping yourself in the game all day long. And tournaments are almost all mental, because you can be a great fisherman on the weekday and you show up and you get nervous and you get flustered, and all of a sudden you're running around and you're fishing too fast, and you know, you don't catch anything, you know. It's just, that's what makes tournament fishing so great to me, is that it's all a matter of your decision making and then your execution, you know, because you can make the right decisions and break fish off and be in the same boat as if you had just been spinning your wheels all day. But then you have those days that are magic, where everything works out and you're fishing clean, and, you know, that's when you win.
Well, not to cut you guys off, but we're running at the end of our show here. I've got one more question for you guys, you know, kind of with all this, but you are both apex anglers, which is out here in the West. That's basically that's our new top, you know, rank right there. If you can make it as an apex angler, you know, you're doing something right. You can, you know, from there, you have other options to go if you want to go out bigger. How are you guys looking for the upcoming season? You know, what are you feeling like? What does it look like? How are you feeling about, I know they don't give you everything up front, but, you know, what do you guys think of you know, you've been here, this is the 2nd year that it's been in existence?
Third.
Well, this will be the 3rd coming up, right?
The 3rd. Yeah,
we're going into the 3rd, but so it's been around for 2 years. Both of you have fished it both years, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, So what do you really feel about the Apex? How does it, how is this thing as far as a tournament, going towards the top level, competing against, Bass Pro Tour, the FLW, that all that, or not, I guess that doesn't exist anymore. So it's the Bass Pro Tour, but at the the Bassmaster events, how does this look to you guys as that level of event?
Well, Zach's fished it all, so I'll let him start off first, so he can kind of compare everything, and then I'll let you know how I feel after.
Yeah. Well, I've been fortunate. I fished the Bassmaster Tour before it was released. I had an invite to the first Elite Series and decided to fish the FLW National Guard at the time, which was a great decision in my eyes. At that time, I always wanted to be able to fish out west as a professional and not have to travel and feel like I had to be on the road, all year long to fish big tournaments. So Jeremy and Wild West Bass and the sponsors have all really given us a playing field to kind of do that out here. And, it's growing every year. Every year, new twists and turns, things happen. The fields are getting a little bit larger every year. We started, I think we had under 30 the first year. Last year we went up to 40 something, and this year we'll be higher, and so the caliber of anglers that you fish against are like nothing else. It's like fishing against the top 10 at the Pro-Am every weekend, and I think it's great. It gets a lot of publicity. A lot of people are excited about it. I think with excitement comes more knowledge, and I think guys are understanding more now kind of how we do things, being that we go to lakes, we don't get any practice. We're not supposed to get any information. Guys are bound by basically once the season is announced, we're not allowed to solicit information from anybody other than other Apex anglers about the locations. It's basically you show up and fish. No pre-practice. There's no official practice days. So when we're showing up to those lakes, we're literally showing up the night before to do a meeting, and then we're out the next morning and we're fishing immediately for a fish to count. And we get to keep fish on a ledger of the keepers, as many keeper size fish, which is a 14-inch minimum we can catch in a day counts. And then also the top weights count. And then there's a hybrid in between, which is a little bit confusing for people that aren't participating, but that's how they make the top 10. And then on the final day, we fish just for the top 5 biggest fish for the win of the event. And, I'm really looking forward to this year. The schedule is going to be amazing. We're going to travel to some places that none of us have been to before. And it's going to be a real open playing field, and I'm just excited about it. One of my sponsors, St. Croix, came on this year to support the Apex and Wild West. So it's great to be able to work for them and still be able to fish the same circuit. And, we got guys like Ish that are going to be, participating. And, it's a great way for the Western anglers to be able to fish on a different level than the Pro-Ams and not have to travel, to Alabama and Arkansas for that kind of stuff. So to me, it's a great opportunity. Glad to be a part of it. And this year, I think is going to be really exciting.
All right. Well, now let's hear if Nick doesn't like it at all.
No, it's a really fun format.
Okay.
It's like refreshingly fun. You know what I mean? When you're so used to the five fish limit, and when you do the 5 fish limit and you have multiple days, it kind of gives people a chance to just run away with it. You know what I mean? If guy caught, 30 pounds, 20 pounds, 25 pounds, I mean, he deserved it. He smoked the field, but in this kind of format, you're never out of it. You know what I mean? You could have a horrible day on day 1 and then come back on day 2 and catch 50, 60 keepers, and bam, you're in the top 10. All you want to do is make top 10. It doesn't matter how you get there. You just need to make it to the top 10. And then you go swinging for your best 5 on day 3. It's awesome. It's bringing me to lakes that I've never been to a lot of these lakes, I mean, almost every single one of them, I have never been to. And I've had a great year this year. I mean, I took second at Lake Trinity. I've never been there. I took second at Mojave. I've never been there. Where else did we go? Columbia River. I've been there once, but it wasn't really on the Columbia River. I cast a check there. And then El Capitan in San Diego. I cast a check there, and I've never been there. So, I mean.
So for you, what you're saying right there is that beginner's luck is really heavy for you.
I just pretty much. I mean, I like it because I'm not practicing. I'm not catching my fish before the tournament. You know what I mean? I'm not, and that's what I usually tend to do prior. Is when I would go practice, I would just end up catching a lot of fish and screwing myself over in the long run. And you know, a couple of years, maybe 2 years ago, I stopped doing that. I stopped hooking fish. I started just using my graphs a lot more and moving around. The Apex has just made me an all-around better angler, just to get out there and figure out how to catch these fish in the conditions that are given to me at the moment. And to do good doing that, it makes you feel like you're in the right spot. You're fishing in the right, you know, against the right guys. I mean, look at the guys that are in there. All of the people that are fishing Apex have won something major, or, you know, multiple major things. They fished back east, you know, multiple boat wins. I mean, these guys, they know what they're doing. And when you could come out on top of a lot of these guys, it just, on a place that you've never even been to, it just reassured, okay, you know, because you have bad tournaments where you question what you're even doing, you know, fishing out here against these guys. And I had it before where I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing out here. These lake guys are just kicking my teeth in, but it's awesome. I love it. It's opened up a huge door for me for sponsorships. I picked up a lot of great companies. You know, I got on with Ranger this year.
Wow.
Phoenix Rods, Mercury, G-Rat, my own company, my brother's bait shop. I had a buddy with a RJ Electric. He sponsored my whole year last year. Gone Fishing Marine. Just this whole network of people have really stepped up and helped me. And you know, this is real expensive. You know, if you're doing Apex, you're doing MLF, you're doing team tournaments, it can add up really, really fast, especially with inflation and everything going on. So to actually have a sponsor who can pay for some of your season or the whole season, it's just a weight lifted off of you. And I don't think I could have achieved that staying out west without Apex being in place.
That's what we're looking for out here. A place to go if you're an angler out there and you want to be, you know, reach some of those upper levels. The Apex seems to be the one out in the West Coast that's going to make the biggest noise. So guys, with that kind of done, we got to wrap it up here. And I really appreciate you both coming on. This has been a really fun show. And, you know, we hope that, hope we can hear from both of you during the course of this year and how the events are going and how you guys are doing. And thanks again. It's been really good.
Well, I appreciate it.
Wow,
thanks for the invite.
No problem. Guys, so we're going to wrap this one up. Thanks for tuning in. Next week, we'll either have Jared Littner or Brandon Coulter. So those are two big names after I just had these two West Coast studs out here. We'll have those guys on too. So keep tuning in to the BAM Pod, and thanks for tuning in this time. We'll see you on the next one.